Hello and welcome all the Web3 enthusiasts. This is Mike speaking. This is Synopsis, and this is a new, amazing, I believe, interview. Today, I'm excited to host this discussion with Vijay Chetty, CEO of Eclipse Labs, and I believe that you guys will find a lot of insights and interesting ideas from today. So, welcome, Vijay. Thanks for joining in. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Max.
Yeah, so a bunch of questions prepared, so let's just get this party going. And for
Yeah.
starters, so tell us, please, how did you come up with the idea to get the best of Ethereum and Solana under one roof? What difficulties have you overcome while implementing this vision?
Great question. So it's been kind of a organic path to how I got here and kind of how Eclipse came about to be, right? Because it really goes back to the previous work I was doing in the Ethereum DeFi space, right? So in the years leading up to Eclipse, I was building DYDX and Uniswap, which at this point are pretty well established blue chip DeFi protocols on Ethereum, or were on Ethereum L1, right? And then if you look at the evolution of both of those protocols, Uniswap has moved towards layer twos, and in fact has recently launched its own app-specific rollup or app chain called Unichain, using the OP Stack framework. And then DYDX has migrated entirely off an Ethereum layer two to its own app chain using Cosmos, right? So its own L1. And the motivating reasons behind a lot of that was one is scalability, right? If you're running a very high throughput app with a lot of transactions and users, you are concerned about having to compete with other apps on the network for network bandwidth and capacity, right? So especially for something like DYDX, where you're talking about a perpetuals order book trading product, you really need that capacity to support thousands of transactions per second without throttling or rate limiting, right? So that's one motivation for a lot of apps to move to app-specific rollups or app chains. The second big one is the value accrual, right? So it's an additional way to drive value or fees or revenue streams to the token, whether that's from trading fees in the case of DYDX, or whether that's sequencer fees in the case of Unichain. And so you kind of have these forces that have moved a lot of major DeFi protocols off entirely off chain in many cases, right? Where so DYDX has moved to this L1. Uh, Uniswap recently launched this product called Uniswap X, which is an RFQ product where transactions are matched off chain, right? And that's kind of the the general direction that most apps in crypto are going to, right? Is moving a lot of things off chain. So you're losing a lot of the benefits of liquidity, transparency, and composability that was the motivating forces for the on-chain world in the first place, right? So Eclipse is an idea that we kind of arrived at through the process of building and seeing a lot of this app space where because Eclipse uses the SVM, the Solana virtual machine for execution, but still settles to Ethereum, you can so effectively, that means that Eclipse is a layer two for Ethereum, right? And the SVM is natively parallelized, which means that it's capable of supporting multiple hotspots. And you can have multiple apps that are doing extremely well or seeing a lot of transaction activity all coexisting on the same L2, right? So you can have very high throughput apps, but they can still continue to benefit from shared liquidity, transparency, and composability. And then Eclipse is also returning MEV to apps, right? So this sort of solves for the economic point I made earlier that was motivating apps to move off chain. And so they can really earn the percent of network value that they generate through this MEV redistribution. So that's the other big point to what Eclipse solves. So in a nutshell, Eclipse is it's an SVM based layer two for Ethereum, and it's really designed for maximum throughput to be the fastest layer two on Ethereum, while also returning value to app builders.
Well, sounds amazing, and I believe that when you were at the very beginning, you were asking yourself like, why no one has done it before? So you are the one who is making it right now. So actually, it will be very interesting to have a deeper dive into some features and how different your vision is from other L2. So like everyone seems to be trying to get the best of Ethereum and build something, but not so many successful stories. So mostly questions today will be a little bit all about this. And for now, the next question is, please tell us how Eclipse mainnet is different from Arbitrum Stylus.
Arbitrum is still an EVM-based layer two or roll-up, right? So basically what they're doing is trying to expand their top of funnel to tap into Rust developers to be able to deploy to Arbitrum as well, right? But the difference of Arbitrum Stylus versus Eclipse is that Eclipse is still using the native SVM for the execution environment, which means that it's still natively parallelized and has other features that are part of the Solana execution environment, which include local fee markets and a variety of other kind of design features that cater to high throughput and extensible use cases, right? So fundamentally, the virtual machine design of Eclipse is still different than Arbitrum's, even in the case of Arbitrum Stylus, right? But the similarity is that as a Rust developer, you could easily deploy to Eclipse as well as to Arbitrum's, uh, thanks to Arbitrum Stylus. So it's kind of expanding the top of the funnel from that perspective. But Eclipse is strictly focused on Rust developers, right? And we think there's a lot of value to tapping into the native SVM and really benefiting from the order of magnitude higher TPS capacity that it has compared to the EVM, right? So we're talking about right now about 3,000 transactions per second, which most apps aren't even pushing in Solana, right? And especially with Firedancer coming, that's going to push the transactions per second to up to 1 million theoretically, right? So you're talking about essentially unbounded TPS thanks to the design of the SVM specifically. So we're very much making a bet on not just Rust, but on the SVM specifically as a high potential execution environment.
Okay, get it. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Everything seems to be pretty clear now. So a little bit more about builders. So I'm not a builder or developer, but still it's pretty interesting to get some feedback from those who had a chance to use your facilities. So you've been running the mainnet for builders since summer. What do they say about their experience? Do you collect it?
So we've had a few months where developers have had a chance to deploy, right, since kind of early August. And that was very intentional on our part because rather than just go straight to public mainnet or kind of full production, we wanted to have a period of time where the app developers, the infra partners could come in and work out the kinks in their products, right? So by the time we move to public mainnet here in a couple of weeks from when we record this podcast, um, things will be kind of very smoothly running for the public retail audience, right? So we've really kind of found a lot of value to having this developer focused period only. I think the ironic thing is that some of our community and users have been passionate and interested enough to still find a way to access the network through kind of the early interfaces that have been built and kind of make a very early bet on the network. But in terms of kind of active support and marketing, it's all been developer focused. And I think the second part of your question was, what do they say about their experience? And in general, we've found that it's been quite smooth, right? I think a lot of that owes to the fact that there's now a fairly well-established Rust and SVM developer community that is familiar with the Solana execution environment, right? It's not as large as the Solidity developer base, of course, but I think it's a very focused kind of high potential developer base, right? Because Rust is not an easy language to learn, right? And it's also something that's very common in Web 2, right, in traditional tech. So you have these, very strong developers who come in and they want to build novel ideas in Web 3, right? And so they kind of have this Rust toolkit. So I think in that sense, it's a very, and the other part of kind of the developer segment is existing Solana devs, right, who have been building on Solana for years at this point. And so for them, Eclipse is it offers the ability to expand their user and asset base, right? Because now they can take their existing Solana code base, modify the RPC, and deploy it to Eclipse so that they can tap into Ethereum users and assets. So it's kind of a market growth story from their perspective. So even for that developer base, they're very familiar with the SVM. And so, I think in general, we've found things to be quite smooth. We've also spent a lot of time on our documentation and developer tooling and making sure that we're communicating the key oracles out there like Pith and Switchboard, the key RPC options. And so, just really putting all the tools in the hands of developers and educating them has been extremely impactful there as well.
Well, thank you. Moving on to the next question, actually. And as I know, you describe the builder's release as being full of training wheels. Which of them are you getting rid of at public launch?
Yeah, so the training wheels is very much like something that we'll slowly take those off, and as we move towards being a full stage one roll up, right? So uh, the key features of Mainnet for developers includes a production ready SVM layer 2 environment for builders to launch their apps and infrastructure providers to migrate their services, right? So this is oracles and wallets like Backpack and Salmon. Um, the functionalities of public mainnet will include the withdrawal functionality, which is going live. And then shortly after that, fraud proofs, forced inclusion, and a model for the MEV redistribution to apps that I was talking about earlier. So those follow-on features will ship immediately after the launch of public mainnet, so between Q4 of this year and Q1 of next year. And so that's kind of our short-term roadmap. And then longer term beyond that, consistent with our goal to become the one scalable chain for all apps and the best place for all app builders, our goal is to implement Firedancer, or at least with Frankendancer as a precursor to that, right? So that's kind of core Solana technology that is going to push TPS, to a whole new order of magnitude. And so Eclipse will be implementing that at the layer 2 level. And as a layer 2, we don't need to worry as much about the decentralization component that a layer 1 does, right, in order to maintain security. So we may be able to even tap into a higher TPS than a layer 1 that's implementing Firedancer is. So that's something that we're excited about for next year, but that's a little bit further out as well.
Awesome, thank you. And since we are so close, and in our discussion, we came to the public launch, so it's time for some announcements or maybe teasers. So could you please tell us what activities do you have lined up for the public launch?
For public launch, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks here from when we're speaking, we'll have kind of a big bang launch, right? Where we'll highlight up to 20 apps that will be there on day one. And those apps will have interfaces, and we'll really market those alongside the apps that are deploying. And the goal is to organically drive user activity towards the apps they're most interested in, right? And give them a chance to really start to use them, engage with them. So these include DeFi dexes, right? Like Orca and Solend, prediction markets, like Hedgehog, Sharp Trade. There's also some more kind of consumer-oriented apps that we're incubating. And then there's a DePIN app called Beacon that is an AI data hub for Web3 data to be monetized into Web2 kind of AI products. So we have a combination of kind of existing Solana apps expanding to Eclipse, as well as Eclipse native apps that are deploying from day one. So we'll really be highlighting those and driving users to all those interfaces. And then shortly after that, we'll roll out the Quest system, which is kind of a gamified way for users to engage with all the apps on Eclipse, right? So from that point on, it'll be a lot of community marketing, hosting a lot of Discord AMAs, and really kind of educating our user base on the products, taking in user feedback, and then continuing to scale up from there as we onboard more apps, more users, and more TVL to the network as well.
Awesome. Sounds just amazing, and I like the thing that you mentioned, collecting feedback from the community because it's really valuable. Okay, so guys, stay tuned, and next couple of weeks, a lot of big things are coming. And we're moving to the next question. So I wanted to ask uh, in the very beginning, but I decided to put it for now. So your major goals going forward include stage 2 decentralization and many things on the tech side. And what about your business goals?
On the business side, we're very focused on growth, of course, right? So becoming the largest layer 2 on Ethereum by users or wallets, as well as TVL. But we're very intentionally focused on doing that in a way that attracts long-term users, right? Because I think a lot of infra when they launch, they tend to attract short-term farmers or people who are yield farming. And our goal is very much to attract a longer term kind of user, right? And that's why we won't have quests from day one of public mainnet. And so we want to do things in a thoughtful way while continuing to really index towards ambitious growth goals, right? And so those kinds of KPIs for us of users and wallets, transactions, TVL are very important to us. And ultimately, we'd like for the apps and user base to really highlight the throughput and the benefits of building on Eclipse, right? So throughput being a big part of that. And then the second piece being MEV redistribution back to app builders, right? We want Eclipse to be the best place for app builders as well as for their users. So telling that story over time as we grow, I think is very much our North Star on the business side. And ultimately, we like for the flywheel of developers to really kind of see organically what the benefits of building on Eclipse is, and to really grow that developer base in a way where, there's all sorts of apps starting to develop already that we haven't heard about, right? And so how can we really highlight and showcase the best of those apps and create a great developer support system as well?
Get it. Thank you. Pretty detailed. And so at this point, all the things we discussed before are getting closer to each other. And the next question is, how do you plan to win over the conservative users who choose to overpay and stick to Ethereum?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I assume here you're talking about Ethereum layer one users, right? Or say users of existing Ethereum EVM L2s that are paying higher gas or higher transaction fees. Um, I think a lot of that is kind of education, right? We sort of have this tribal aspect in crypto, right? Where Ethereum is very tribal, Solana is very tribal. Even Ethereum L2s can be tribal, right? And it's a part of the identity of crypto in general. And Eclipse is sort of coming in as a little bit more of this practical or almost you could call it neutral player, where our goal has really been to build the best stack from first principles, right? So the fastest execution with the SVM, access to the largest user and asset base with Ethereum, and then the lowest cost of posting blocks of data thanks to using Celestia for data availability, right? So it's kind of this best stack. And we really took a practical approach to that, right? So our goal is to provide Ethereum users with the fastest layer two out there, and therefore the most interesting place for them to come and interact, right? And the cost of gas and transactions is extremely low. It's on par with Solana, right? So we think naturally over time that economic incentive or just kind of natural incentive will be attractive to them. But short term, there's definitely a lot of education or evangelism to do as well, right? Because I think particularly Ethereum users kind of might stick to what they're used to or know or have their favorite L2, right? And so really telling a story of like, here's an order of magnitude lower cost that you pay in order to submit transactions to Eclipse. And here's why that's interesting and the types of apps that helps enable. So I think initially it'll be a lot of that kind of education and evangelism, but confident over the long arc of time that the kind of economic incentive and practical aspects will win out as well.
Get it. Get it. Thank you. How long do you think will Ethereum will be the top chain by TVL? So actually, the question is, what does a blockchain need to beat Ethereum? So Solana and Tron haven't solved this puzzle with low fees and high TPS. What's your idea?
Yeah, that's kind of the golden question, right? I think Ethereum and Solana are in a league of their own in general as layer ones, right? They're these really interesting platforms that have demonstrated reliability and security over a very long arc of time. And then on top of that, have become very interesting places for developers to build while being able to access a very large user and asset base, right? And I think in the last year or two, like I think when Eclipse was getting started, Solana was $8 in price, right? And in the last kind of year and a half, it's been a dramatically different kind of situation for Solana, right? And they've really benefited from meme coins, right? And the meme coin kind of mania, which is the ultimate democratization of crypto and crypto's ideals in a way, right? Taken to the extreme. And that's been really interesting to see, right? I think it's also helped test a lot of the value propositions and kind of technical capabilities of Solana as well. And, Solana now at this point is seeing a ton of growth in other use cases as well, right? Like stable coins and what PayPal and others are doing on Solana. So, I think both Solana and Ethereum are definitely growing a ton, right? There's been a bit of a narrative around Ethereum recently of all the activity might go to L2s or away from the base layer. And, I think Ethereum itself is working on its roadmap, but both of these systems are going to be around for a very long time and probably continue to lead in terms of TVL for the foreseeable future, right? So I think if a platform is really trying to dethrone Ethereum, Solana is like the closest to doing the right thing there, but it's really thinking about first base layer security and reliability and frankly a track record that's battle tested through multiple cycles. And then the second is becoming a very interesting place for developers, supporting that developer tooling. And then the last, of course, is like that the retail kind of activity and supporting that, right? Like it's interesting that meme coins, which are highly retail, have existed, 90%, 95% on Solana, right? And so there's something that Solana is doing right that's appealing to that retail audience, right? I think a lot of that boils down to UX and low fees and the ability for the network to not be throttled when there's a lot of usage or activity, right? So there's kind of some learning lessons in there, and a lot of ways we're trying to take those learning lessons at Eclipse and bring those over to Ethereum with the SVM, right?
Well, thank you. So I believe it's what you say is one of not so many cases when meme coins did something good for the industry actually, and
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
actually I'm glad to hear that. So the next question, and we're getting actually closer to the end of our interview, but uh, I decided to move it closer to the end, although it is again about the public launch. Some more announcements, maybe uh, long-term or short-term plans. So what's the next big thing after the Eclipse public launch? Will you ever support other blockchains besides Ethereum and Solana?
after the Eclipse public launch, the main goal for us is going to be growth, right, for the foreseeable future and supporting developers and users. And then also from a product and technical level, becoming a stage one and then a full stage two roll up, right? And then decentralizing the governance and increasingly open sourcing. So those are kind of our core focus for the foreseeable future. For Eclipse, the vision has always been to build one general purpose rollup that can support the entire ecosystem, right? And that kind of offers that unbounded throughput that returns value to developers. So we're very much focused on building this one rollup, right? But if you look at others in the ecosystem, they're kind of building, say, more for like the app specific rollup world, right? Like OP Stack or other rollup frameworks where the goal is to support kind of multiple rollups per app. But we think there's a lot of value in building this one shared general purpose layer two, where you can not worry about throughput, not worry about value capture, but continue to leverage the benefits of liquidity, transparency, and composability, or being on chain, right? So for us, we really don't want to hedge and to build multiple rollups using the Eclipse framework, right? We want to focus purely on the Eclipse mainnet. Um, and part of that too means like, we very intentionally chosen Ethereum, given it's the largest user and asset base, um, to be a roll-up for, right? So there are other teams exploring taking the SVM to Bitcoin or to other ecosystems. And, we've been supporting those at kind of an industry level, but at least for the foreseeable future, we'll be focused on this single general purpose layer two and really building that out, right? It's interesting. Eclipse got its start supporting app-specific rollups as a RaaS provider, right? So rollups as a service. And what we realized was that at the time, a lot of these apps wanted the EVM execution, right? So vanilla EVM. It was very early for the SVM. And we realized, you don't really need a ton of these rollup frameworks in the industry, right? It's basically enterprise software. And it's become kind of click to deploy at a point uh, for those who can kind of run the infrastructure. And instead, we saw an opportunity to really build something for all the apps out there, right? Because the reality is no single app was really pushing the transaction limits of deploying their own rollup, right? And instead, they were facing a ton of challenges like interoperability issues, liquidity fragmentation, a lot of infrastructure cost overhead. And so we actually kind of went entirely in the opposite direction with building this kind of single general purpose mainnet for Eclipse and realized thanks to the SVM and its capabilities, you can support hundreds of very high throughput apps, right? And these apps don't need to worry about throughput. And if you return the MEV value to them, they still get the economic benefit of running their own rollup, right? So really like, I think a good analogy to this is cloud infrastructure versus running your own locally installed servers, right? Almost nobody runs locally installed servers anymore, except for, very high sensitivity, the government type organizations. And there's a reason for that, right? It's that developers want to focus on what they're good at, which is building apps. And running infrastructure is a totally different kind of overhead, right? That's a different DNA effectively. And so for us, we really want to focus on what we're good at and build for that audience of developers who wants to focus on what they're good at.
Wow, awesome. Thank you very much. Pretty detailed answer. And I see that your primary focus is growth and expansion of the network. And from my side, I wish you the best of luck with this. I believe that you have all pieces of puzzle for that. And the idea, the product is just great. And we have come up to our last traditional question. So we always ask our guests to give some piece of advice to our audience. Actually, our audience is pretty much diversified. There are both newbies, there are both pioneers of Web3. So could you please share some piece of wisdom? It might be universal, it might be just for the newbies, might be for the builders, call to action, some rules, whatever you find useful to say at the current moment, at the current state of the market. So please go ahead. It's your time to address to our audience.
Yeah, thanks a lot for listening, guys. First of all, in terms of advice I'd give, I think we're at a very interesting point in the cycle where the infrastructure needs are being met for app developers, right? So the next wave is really going to be app focused, right? On what are the interesting apps that people can build? How can we build new types of apps beyond, say, just the DeFi space, which is well established? So I think really paying attention to consumer apps, depend apps, gamified kind of socialify type apps as well, and new apps that really attract your attention, right? Because ultimately, consumer discovery, I think, is going to be essential to really determining what the most successful apps are, right? And so I think it's a great opportunity to really kind of ramp up with the space as things grow at the app level in this next cycle and start to really use and test out the apps that are interesting to you guys or have something interesting that attracts your attention, right? Because we're about to see a huge wave of these, and there's a lot of alpha in terms of being an early adopter and early user of these apps and being a part of that app journey, right? And I think the other thing I'd say is, just very much do as opposed to just kind of reading or uh, you know, take what you hear on podcasts or take what you read on crypto Twitter or blogs and apply that, right? Because I think there's a ton that you can learn. And whether you're considering being a builder or being a power user of these apps, you can really kind of up level by doing that. And I think this next wave of the cycle is going to be super interesting. So excited to see where it goes. And yeah, thanks a lot for having me on, Max. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vijay. And I completely agree with every word you said. So guys, keep up leveling, keep being involved, and we are living in the interesting times. No need actually maybe to wait even for the next waves. Just let's see what's going right now and here. And yeah, we'll be looking forward for the public launch of Eclipse. I believe everyone is very bullish on that. And once again, I wish you best of luck. So thank you once again for joining in. A very insightful and interesting discussion we have. Wow, look at the time, it ran so fast. Means that it was very interesting. And if you guys who are watching us now think the same way, please thumbs up to see Vijay in more episodes. I believe that we will meet soon. So thanks everyone for watching till the end. Have a good day, night, or whatever is in your region. Take care and see you in the next episodes. Bye bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Max.